Before Brandon Beane and Terry Pegula explained themselves to the media on Wednesday morning, I wanted to get on here and talk about the behind-the-scenes details that we heard about the Sean McDermott firing as head coach of the Buffalo Bills. We're going to dive into it in just a moment as you're watching the Bills Breakdown by Chat Sports, and I am your host, Tyler Smith. There's been a lot of turmoil, and there's been a lot of talk on Bills Twitter and Bills social media over the last couple of days, and I'm going to ask you guys this. If you think that the Bills fired the wrong guy, they should have fired Brandon Beane instead of Sean McDermott, or fired both altogether, show me, make it known, go down below and hit that thumbs up icon if you think the Bills should have fired Brandon Beane as well. All right, there was a power struggle. That's the crux of the situation. There was a power struggle between Brandon Beane, the general manager, and Sean McDermott, the head coach. Now, some people are pointing to potentially Sean McDermott having more say in this Bills roster than we had really been learned to, let on about, but that's not really the case from what we've heard from some NFL insiders here. It seems like with Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane both reporting to Terry Pegula individually, the owner, that we really didn't know who was in charge with the Buffalo Bills. So Brandon Beane up there in the booth with Terry Pegula watching the games every weekend, probably in his ear a little bit, criticizing every little thing that Sean McDermott does wrong. So he is in better standing with ownership when he's really been the one making more of the mistakes here. Look, Sean McDermott knew what we all knew, and this was why there was a struggle. This Bills roster stinks, and the resources that have been put into this Bills roster have been mismanaged by Brandon Beane. And apparently, the general manager who makes those decisions doesn't really like hearing that he makes bad decisions all too much. Because Vic Carucci over at WGR Radio, well, he had this to say about an internal meeting between McDermott, Pegula, and Beane. He said, I'm told that during a meeting held 5 weeks ago between McDermott, Beane, and Pegula, the coach pointed out what the roster lacked to win a Super Bowl. I don't know the specifics McDermott mentioned, but I'm told neither Beane nor Pegula was pleased with McDermott's assessment. Look at these two clowns, man. Look at these absolute clowns running this organization. I mean, how could you sit here and by the way, this is admitted by them too, because it has all come out that they believe that this roster that Sean McDermott had in place was good enough to win a Super Bowl. And sure, maybe it was because Josh was going superhuman, but he didn't against the Denver Broncos. And we saw if he's not perfect, even when the Bills put up 30 points, they're not going to win if Josh is not an absolute demon out there and the spitting image of perfection on the football field. These guys are absolute clowns, and it's just so ironic to hear that Brandon Beane and Terry Pegula were not pleased with McDermott's sentiment when Brandon Beane has put them in this position. Look at a couple misses that Brandon Beane has on his resume, just as of late, right? $28 million against the Buffalo Bills cap for this past year, where the Bills struggled at wide receiver, and everybody knew it. $28 million in cap hits for Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, and Josh Palmer. Those three people combined for 4 touchdowns. And Khalil Shakir had all 4, Curtis Samuel and Josh Palmer, with donuts. Brandon Beane has also drafted just 2 Pro Bowlers in his last 56 draft picks. Do you guys know how embarrassing that is? Like, most guys are fired by the time they pick 50 guys in a row and don't pick a damn Pro Bowler. It's embarrassing. 0 wide receivers, by the way, have been taken in the first round of the NFL draft. So with the Bills pressed up against the cap year in and year out, they can't go out there and make crazy on a wide receiver. That's why they gave mid-level deals to Curtis Samuel and Josh Palmer. But they haven't made that investment in the first round of the NFL draft. As a matter of fact, many of their first-round selections over the past few years have not been worth the space and the capital that they used to select those players. Many of them were not effective or even playing in the Bills' divisional matchup against the Denver Broncos here. So there is more mismanagement from Brandon Beane. The Bills are now over the salary cap heading into the offseason with all these holes and deficiencies on the roster. And he's also openly admitted to neglecting a trade for a wide receiver. He's literally laughed at Jeremy White over at WGR Radio. He called GMs trading for receivers at the deadline this year fantasy footballers. Like, he is a walking embarrassment to this organization. So I blame a lot more here on Brandon Beane than Sean McDermott. If you wanted to fire McDermott, I get it. I'm cool. But the way that they did it is what I really, really disagree with. Because somehow, some way, with Brandon Beane making all these improvements and putting the roster in a good spot per Beane and Pegula to win a Super Bowl, somehow, some way, this roster still has so many holes. I mean, the run defense hasn't gotten better over the past 5 years. The edge rusher is still a problem. The cornerback room, the DB room is going to lose a lot of depth this offseason. And the wide receiver position is still the worst in football. So it is so funny to me that Beane just magically believe that McDermott could go out there and win a Super Bowl with this group. I also wanted to bring up a couple other instances that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have been at odds with each other here. Tim Graham of The Athletic just dropped a whole bombshell article talking about the situation, saying that a significant stumble was Beane claiming disgruntled Pittsburgh Steelers cornerback Darius Slay off of waivers and cutting defensive back Jamarcus Ingram to make room. Slay refused to report to the Bills, and they lost Ingram to the Houston Texans. As a matter of fact, Jamarcus Ingram actually had an interception against the New England Patriots over the weekend. McDermott smoldered whenever asked about it. The Bills usually keep 4 boundary cornerbacks on their 53-man roster, but the fallout left them with 3. And what happened when they had just 3 on the roster? They were playing the New York Jets, up a bazillion points in the fourth quarter, gonna win the football game, but they just literally didn't have any corners to go play at the boundary. So they kept rookie Maxwell Harrison in, and he suffered an ankle injury. And that made the Bills have to pick up Dane Jackson for their active roster. And then Trey White couldn't play 100% of the snaps against Denver. He got banged up for a play. So what did they have to do? They had to sub Dane Jackson in. And what did Sean Payton do? Lick his chops and target Dane Jackson down the sideline. Touchdown, Denver. That is the situation that Brandon Beane has put this organization in, not Sean McDermott. More from Tim Graham here because it wasn't just that. As if McDermott knew he was fighting for his reputation and standing within the organization, he praised opponents' roster specifically in areas where Buffalo was considered lacking. He lauded the Philadelphia Eagles defensive line as, quote, a reason why they won the Super Bowl last year, and Jacksonville Jaguars for trades for the Atlantic cornerback Greg Newsome and wide receiver Jacoby Myers. And I'm not going to sit here and act like the Jags are going to win the Super Bowl because of that. No, Buffalo beat them, as a matter of fact. Big reason is Sean McDermott coached a hell of a game against Jacksonville in the wild card. But the Eagles actually did win the Super Bowl because they upgraded their defensive line and invested in good football players, made high priority investments, big time cash commitments to good football players. That's how you win games in the National Football League, Brandon. You don't go sifting through the bargain bin just to see if your quarterback can make something out of nothing. That's not how the NFL works. Sean McDermott should be applauded for what he did with this team, not only for the resources that were laid out in front of him, but then all the results of those moves by Brandon Beane. These players getting injured as soon as they step on the field for Buffalo. As soon as they're drafted, they immediately get hurt. And the Bills end up dealing with their 4th or 5th string safety by the time the playoffs come around. Their 4th or 5th string defensive tackles. They have stuff rolling around on the defensive line at the edge spots. What about cornerback, where they have Dane Jackson in the game? What about Darnell Savage getting targeted over the top for a touchdown because he had to play in place of Jordan Poyer, who also you brought in the middle of the season at 35 years old to try to rectify things because Taylor Rapp stunk and then got hurt. It's just a total disaster here, and Josh Allen is the glue that keeps it all together. Could you imagine if he wasn't, if he was 75% as good of a quarterback as he actually is, this team would be in a lot worse of a spot. Now Brandon Beane has to go out there and clean up a mess that he himself made. Considering he made the mess, I really don't trust him to clean it up, in all honesty with you guys. With that being said, I got to ask you guys, are the Bills better off today, or were they better off last week before Sean McDermott was all fired? Are they better off today, or were they better off last week? If they're better off today than they were a week ago, let me know in the comment section by typing Y for yes or N for no. Now, coming up next, we got to tell you what Beane has to work with. We're going to give you a little bit of an offseason outlook just to show you how daunting of a task this is going to be for a guy who's, let's be honest, in way over his head. We'll talk about it in a second. First, though, I got to tell you guys about this awesome deal for some Bills polos. I know it's freezing cold right now. I know it's 8 feet of snow on the ground, but guess what? You're going to want these when the weather gets a little bit warmer. And it's a 2-pack, a 2-for-1 with some Bills throwback logos and fonts on there. You can find them here below at chatsports.com/Bills polos. That's chatsports.com/Bills polos. You get the blue, you get the white, 2 polos for the price of 1. Chatsports.com/Bills polos. That link's in the comment section and description of today's video. All right, a little offseason outlook for the Buffalo Bills here. Currently negative $13.3 million in effective cap space. Now, I wouldn't read too much into that number. We got some things to sort out here to make that look a little bit better. You can cut Curtis Samuel and Dawson Knox. You create $16 million there, and I would consider bringing Knox back, but on a cheap deal. If you cut him, you save $9.7 million. The Bills aren't going to think twice about that. You restructure Josh Allen a little bit. You restructure Spencer Brown a little bit. That can create $22 million in available salary. So then that's $38 million to minus 13. You have about $25 million in cap space to work with, even before any other restructurings or moves or extensions that you end up making. There's 47 players under contract for 2026, so the Bills still have a lot of continuity coming into next season. They also have 7 picks in the 2026 NFL Draft, and I hope Beane hits on him. 26th overall pick is where they'll play. Will make their first selection in the first round. Now, in terms of free agents on this Buffalo team, a couple of key guys to look out for here. Connor McGovern and David Edwards are the two big names. Bills are one of the best offensive line units in football. Those two names are priorities for me to be bringing back here. Joey Bosa, you can catch the next flight to Cancun. Trey White, I don't know what another year will look like under Trey White, but he's certainly earned himself a lot of respect in this Bills organization, as if he didn't have enough already in his previous tenure with Buffalo. But he really had an underrated season. I'd be interested to see if they bring him back as a depth piece. Matt Milano, another guy I'd probably want back on a team-friendly deal, if anything. AJ Epinesa, again, I'm indifferent on bringing back Epinesa. You guys can let me know out of these free agents who you would want to bring back the most. Now, the Bills also need to upgrade big time at a couple of key positions here. Like we've kind of been mentioning throughout the show, they haven't made these upgrades. Brandon Beane hasn't to the roster, so we'll see if he does this offseason with a lot of people breathing down his neck. Wide receiver, edge, and safety. It's going to be difficult to address all three of those. We've seen the Bills invest into players along the defensive line in the NFL draft, and some of them not really netting big-time results. So can they go get a number 1 or number 2 wide receiver to give Josh Allen a little bit of something to work with on the outside? Can they get an edge that can get to the quarterback consistently over 17 games and not have to worry about injury or not living up to the contract like Greg Rousseau has done since getting an extension? We didn't even talk about all the extensions that Brandon Beane handed out, that some of them aren't looking too great right now. I'm looking at you, Terrell Bernard, and Greg Rousseau. And then safety. I mean, can't run back Jordan Poyer another year. Going to have to find somebody back there. And Taylor Rapp absolutely stinks. So there's a lot still to work out here at Buffalo. They don't have a lot of money to do it. But hey, Brandon Beane said, I'm the man. This is my team. I'm making the decisions now. So we'll see what he does with them. What do you guys think is the biggest offseason need for the Buffalo Bills with all of that said? Comment down below what you guys think the biggest thing the Bills need to do the rest of this offseason is. They've already fired the head coach. As that will do it for today's show. Give me a follow over on Twitter at Tyler J. Smith. 2 H's because the name's common, but I am not. And make sure you're subscribed to the channel as well. YouTube.com/Bills News for the latest and greatest on your Buffalo Bills all offseason long. We'll see you guys next time. And as always, let's go Buffalo.